2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm going to be the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply ask your questions in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running. So if it's version 12, 13, or 14, also if you're running Cubase, which level, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and your operating system. So if you're running Mac or Windows, that information is always helpful. When asking questions, my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed, but we will go through all of the questions as asked chronologically. If you don't get an immediate response to your question, we will get through them chronologically. We should have an index of all topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. And if you wanted to, and we will have it by timestamp so that you could navigate quickly to various topics to find answers or solutions. Also, if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful site. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees, they just do it to make it a better community experience. So we'll give a special thanks to them, and also an additional message of gratitude to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so you see Jazz Dude's just mentioning that if you haven't gotten Cubase 14, there's currently a promotion that started today with premium partner products at no cost. So if you're a Cubase 14 user, if you haven't updated yet, it's a wonderful opportunity for updates and for getting Cubase 14. And also there's a series of partner products that are available to no cost that will be in your My Steinberg account in the vouchers. So I had a question right before, is how to find the vouchers for the premium partner products. So let's go take a look at that. So we'll come over here to the website and we'll go to steinberg.net. So let me just all right. So when you want to sign in with your My Steinberg credentials. So I'll just come over here, I'll sign into my account, and then look under vouchers, and here you could see all of the premium partner products. So you get more premium partner products if you have Cubase Pro versus Cubase Artist or Elements, but here you could see more information on how to redeem the codes, and often directions of how to install. You may have to create a user account on the partner product company, but with Cubase Pro you get the beat effects from Lander, the Universal Audio Verve Analog Essentials, Errors Multi-Chorus, Acoustic Audio Fire the Delay, Clev Grand Stark, you get Plugin Boutique, Excite Audio, Arturia Rev Plate 140, Brainworks BX Clipper, Soft Tube, Bad Speaker, and Steinberg Materials and Ice, and Safari Pedals Time Machine. So if you have Cubase Pro, it's not an April Fool's prank. It's coming on April 1st, but you could save. And these are all available for Cubase 14 users because Steinberg likes their users. So take advantage of that. I think they're good through April 28th. So go through the process and take advantage of the different premium partner products that are available for you to access being a Cubase 14 user. Okay. So you see Tim K just saying he's grateful for the opportunity joining once again from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw. Hello to my cat Steven and other pets. He's ready to learn. We see Pablo Vasquez on from Galicia, España. Always wonderful to have Pablo on, the wonderful drummer from Hot Mess. All right. So we see Stefan checking in from Sweden. We have Jan from Stockholm, also in Sweden. Just sending greetings to the Cubase family. All right. So a question from Ness. Hi, Greg. I use a hotkey for full zoom. Sorry, my chat just jumped. All right. It says I use a hotkey for full zoom, but after the last update of 14, it only works horizontally and not totally. Hope you can. I hope you can help. Thank you, Ness. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say if I'll just open up a different project, it's not so scattered around. Okay, so let's say we have this particular project here. I'll just turn off my divide track list so you can see it a little easier. Okay, so I have this project and we want to do zoom full. So let's try just with our, so if we come here, we could see the full zoom. Now I'm going to, so if we were, let's say if we are here and I wanted to zoom, let's see if we come over here, if this works both horizontally and vertically. So we say zoom full. Okay, so it looks like maybe, and I'm just going to see if the behavior, I think I have the previous Nuendo version. I don't have the previous Cubase version, but I'll see if that behavior is consistent. I'm not sure if it zoom full just vertically, but we'll find out here. See if the behavior has changed from previous versions or if it's working the same. All right, so let's say here, we'll set up the same conditions. So we're going to edit, zoom full. So let me know if it, maybe if other people could confirm. So it looks like it's not changing the vertical aspects, but just the horizontal. So, but it's only doing the horizontal, not the vertical. But it looks like it's the same behavior as was in like 13. But maybe if someone else could comment just to make sure if the behavior had changed for them to do vertical and horizontal. But I could do some more research on that as well. Make a note. All right, Pablo Vasquez just saying, I love you. All right. All right, Millard Brown from Pennsylvania is just saying, hope everyone is well and happy. Thanks for joining us, Millard. All right, we have Rick France checking in from the Pacific Northwest. We have Matt Elston just saying hi to Agent K, Jazz Dude, myself, Michael Teams, and awesome Cubase community. See, Millard Brown just says, I always thought it was an April 1st prank when I discovered the amazing gift of goodies from Steinberg. Lots of cool stuff. Thanks. Yeah, make sure you take advantage of that. All right, Tony Trunzo, it was great to see you on the Zoom meetup from Australia. Asks, how do I use the audio segment detection in Nuendo 14? I use it on Cubase 14, but when I go into Nuendo, it doesn't work for me. The range selection tool is different in Nuendo. All right, so let's take a look. I'll open Nuendo 14. Let's see if it behaves the same way. Okay, so, and the trick to this is just to make sure that as we go to hover, so I'll grab my range tool here, and then you want to hold down the control or command key. All right, so it looks like it seems to be behaving a little differently. Let's just make sure. All right, and I think let's check the settings. So let's come over here to settings, and then tool modifiers. Let's go to the range tool. I'll extend this out. Okay, so right now there's audio segment handling. There's no, so I'm going to assign Command Option Shift. All right, so go to the preferences, to the tool modifiers, to range tool, and under audio segment editing. So I did Command Option plus Shift plus the range tool. And now as we kind of zoom in, that will work. So it looks like you may have to set the modifier in Nuendo. So now that we are kind of hovering over, we can holding down that modifier key. So again, go to your settings or preferences, choose editing, tool modifiers, select the range tool, and assign in audio segment editing right there. So give that a shot. All right. All right, so we have Jahean L. Price just sending greetings from Granada Hills, California. All right, see Miller Brown just saying a big thanks and howdy to everyone on the live stream, including Jazz Dude, Agent K, and Jan from Cubase Index. All right, wonderful to see Vince from Winnipeg in Canada. And we see Jan giving kudos to Jazz Dude for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. All right, we have VS Terra Nova checking in from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue says, in the Pro Series, Pro Instrument, and Pro Rock drums, I can match the tempo and musical mode, but the measures never line up with the grid. I can't find a loop point. So sometimes one thing that I would check is, let's say if we drop a loop in here. Okay, so one of the things that it could be, so like right now, when I'm here, I'm going to say, and I move an event, we could have it kind of automatically snap to the bar with our grid mode here. So let's say now we could have this event snap to the bar, but if you double click, and let's say if we go into, and I don't have that bundle, but if we look at that particular bundle, we'll go to this particular loop again. Let me just find it. Okay, there is a little thing called this little sync point. So, and you may have to adjust, if it's just set to show clips, you may not see that sync point. But if you click here and say show events or show clips and events, at this point, if we move this, and we can think of this as a sync point or a snap point. So now when I move a particular event, it's not going to snap to the beginning of the event, but to where this particular snap point is. So now when I come over, it's that snap point that will be used. So check just to make sure. And this could accidentally be set when you go to, let me see if it's under advanced. But there is like a set sync point function that you could accidentally hit to do that. So try to see if, like when you open in the sample editor and you set it to show events or show clips in events, if the sync point is in not at the beginning of the event, but more at, to just have it automatically. I'll just switch this to grid. So if this is like elsewhere, as soon as I snap, that will not snap the beginning, but snap based on that sync point. So see if your sync point is at the beginning of the events that you drag in, and let me know what you find. All right, Benny asks, is it possible to set it up so that when I add a VST instrument that it is always my complete control keyboard that is pre-selected? So if you wanted that keyboard as your MIDI input, so let's say we go to add an instrument track here. So we add an instrument track, you could set your MIDI input port. So let's say I want that to go not from all MIDI inputs, which is generally the default, to my Panorama P4 MIDI in. So I do that, that's the input, and I believe that that setting will stick. So let's come over here and I go to add another instrument track. So I could just leave that input will stick until another selection is made. So just on the MIDI inputs, select it once, go add another track to the project, another instrument track, then that input choice is automatically maintained for you. Okay, always wonderful to see Kerwin Young. And we have Mark Lawson checking in from the UK. And he was just asking, is there a link for the Discord? I'm sure that Jazz Dude will provide one for you, All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on from Mission Viejo, California. All right, so we have all right, my chat field just jumped. All right, Joss Halen asks, hello, follow problem. I import a MIDI file, then I make the MIDI input and output in the tracks with Alt-Shift. The problem is then every track become the same MIDI channel. That was not the case in Cubase 10. Okay, so let me just export a quick MIDI file here. I'll just open one. Okay, so I'm going to export this as a MIDI file. And I'll just save this into my projects folder. Okay, so let me import this. I'll close this so we don't get any confusion. All right, so let's import the MIDI file. We'll create a new project from it. Just see if it accidentally went to the desktop. Okay, well, let's see if this. All right, let me just re-export that. Let me just. Okay, let me just look at my Finder, see if it shows up as a recent project. Sorry, I just exported it to the wrong folder. All right, I'll try just re-exporting it. Sorry. All right, so here's our Bach MIDI file. Import this. All right, so it says using Alt-Shift. The problem is then every track has the same MIDI channel. So let's say we look at the MIDI channels here. Channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so I'm going to change. We'll go to our routing here. So we'll hold down my Alt or Option plus the Shift key. And let's say I want to change this output to my panorama, P4. So when I look at sorry, I had a wrong modifier key. So let's come over here one more time. Change this to the panorama. Okay. So we look channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. So it looks like, you know, the 4 tracks here, their MIDI channels were preserved. So it looks like everything was automatically, the channels as we look at them are automatically preserved after using the Alt or Option Shift to change the input port. Let me try. So we did the I make the MIDI input and output into tracks with Alt Shift. So let me try the input. So from all MIDI inputs, I'm going to come over and let's set this to panorama. I'll set it to chord pads. So now when we look, let's say our input is chord pads, channel 1. Our output we set channel 1, channel 2, chord pads, panorama, channel 3. So it doesn't look like the that the channel is changing for me, but let me know, Josh, if I did anything differently than you did. See, Mark Lawson is from UK, is just saying he's using Elements 14 at the moment, but hope to upgrade at some point. Yeah, so just think you could probably take advantage of the 30% upgrade currently and get a bunch of partner products free. All right, we have Dirk from Sweden, Gothenburg, says hedge to the community. I'm sure I said that wrong. Wonderful to see Brian Sawyer Sr. checking in from Yuma, Arizona. We missed you on Friday's Zoom social meetup, but we realize that you're probably getting settled into your new home. Hope that your move is going well for you. All right, so we have Cornell checking in from the Netherlands. All right, so you see, yeah, Brian just mentioned later, Mrs. Zoom, you had to put a studio together, so we understand. Hope your new studio is going well. All right, so you see from Tony Trunzo, says, thanks, Greg, it's all working now, cheers. All right, you see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Always a pleasure to see Michael on. All right, so we see Rob Schmedeke says, Greg, I created a MIDI by clicking to the tempo of the audio of an audio track. How do I take the MIDI data and create a tempo track from it and embed it into the audio track? Thanks for your help. Okay, so let's say if I want it, so let's come over, just start this from scratch. All right, so let me just import a file and we'll tap along with it. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of tap along to an audio recording here. So let's make sure I'm not going to kill everyone volume-wise. So I'm going to add a MIDI track. Could be an instrument track, could be a MIDI track, doesn't really matter. All right, so, and what I'm going to do now is as the song plays, I'm just going to tap, let's say, quarter notes with the song. So I'll just tap in from my MIDI controller and we're going to record the data here. So say. All right, so I kind of tapped in MIDI notes here. So if we were to kind of, so what I want to do now is I'm going to select this MIDI information or an instrument track. Let's come over and I think it's under MIDI. And we go to functions, we'll say calculate tempo from MIDI events. And we can say, okay, the distance of the notes, I tapped in quarter notes. So I will come over here. And now that we look at our tempo track, I'll open up and create a tempo track. We can see our tempo map here. Now, if I wanted to embed this tempo map into the file, I could just come right over here, go to audio, to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. So we could put it into the file or write it into the project or write it into the file for demonstration purposes. I'm going to just choose project, but if you wanted that definition written into the file, you could do it just like that. So create a MIDI or an instrument track, record in quarter notes from that event, come over. So if we undo a couple of steps here, let's add a tempo track. So I'm going to select this MIDI part. Again, go to MIDI, to functions, at the very bottom, calculate tempo from MIDI events. We'll say quarter notes, and now the tempo has been calculated. And now to embed those tempo changes as metadata in the file, go to audio, to advanced, and then set definition from tempo. So. All right, so we see Michael Teams is giving Jazz Dude 1 gallon of chocolate chip ice cream for his great Discord and moderation. All right, so we have Beltram joining from Sweden. Thanks for joining today. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped to me again. All right, Mark Lawson asks, hi, can I alter the tempo track and timing in Cubase Elements midway through a session? So if you're in Cubase Elements, I don't think, I could be mistaken, I generally just run the Pro version, but what you could do is, I don't think in Elements that there's a tempo track that's embedded. So I think if you hit, is it Control or Command plus the letter T, that what you could do is you'll get kind of the tempo editor. And once you're here, you could just say, okay, at this point, I'm playing this tempo and I want to go up to this particular tempo. So this could be a ramp because we have ramp selected here, but we could also have this set to step. So I could say at this point, I wanted the tempo to immediately shift to this value on this bar, or I wanted to kind of do an accelerando from that point to that point. So try hitting Control or Command plus the letter T as in tempo, and then you could just enter in. And when you do this, you want to make sure, because Cubase will play back a perfectly steady tempo, you will need to activate the tempo track. Otherwise, it's going to play back a steady 120 beats a minute. But if you wanted to follow the tempo track on a transport, you just want to come right here and activate so that it does all of the tempo changes in the project, as opposed to just being a static tempo. Okay. And I see just the next comment says Mark Lawson just says I have a track at 108 BPM at 6/4 time and I want to increase to 120 BPM at 4/4 time. All right, so if we want to, let's come over here. We'll do this just to show how to do this with the time. So let's say I want this value here, and as you kind of just click, we could just say, okay, I want to be 108 beats per minute here. I'm going to just kind of select this particular value here. So we can say, okay, at this point, I'm going to snap and I'm going to type in 108 beats per minute. Here we can see kind of the signature track up top. So let's say we are at, so I'm going to click right here and say we are in 6/4 meter. And then we wanted to jump, so we'll select step, and right here I want it to be 120 beats a minute, and you can kind of see the value on the right hand side in the field there. So say, okay, I want it to be 120 beats per minute, and at that point I want it to be 4/4. So we could see that these measures will be 50% longer because we're in 6/4 as opposed to 4/4. So just kind of do that. And again, for those changes to take effect, make sure that you have the tempo track enabled there. Okay. Okay, Rob Schmedeke just asked second question. Could you show how to unmix a drum track from audio recording and create MIDI triggers for the separate drums/cymbals to drive a Groove Agent kit? I need to change the drum sounds. All right, so let's just kind of take this particular file here. So we'll unmix this file, and we want to replace the drum sounds. All right, so let's come over. Never tried on this file, but we'll go to our spectral layers. All right, and you need Spectral Layers Pro if you want to do the drums. And what I want to do now is we'll take this and let's unmix the song. Then once this is, so what this is going to do is kind of take our particular different elements like bass, drums, vocal, guitar, piano, brass, those different elements, and kind of unmix those. And then once we have the drums, I'm going to choose to unmix the drums themselves. All right, so just about there. Okay, about 86%. Almost done. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to select so we'll listen to this layer here. So we'll listen to, okay, so we want to replace the drums. So as we come over here, all right, so I'm going to select that layer and we will choose to unmix drums. Okay, and this will break apart like your hi-hat, kick, snare, and cymbals. Okay, so I'm going to move my cursor to the beginning of the project, like where this song begins. I'm going to take, so right now we have a kick drum layer. I want to drag that to the project window. And now what I'm going to do, sometimes I like to come over here and just duplicate a track version. And I'm going to take this version and I'm going to just convert it. I'm going to do a bounce selection. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is double click. Let's load up just a quick kit here. I'll just do Groove Agent SE. I will look for another not default kit that I always use. Let's look for maybe Maple Kit. All right, I'll just all right, let me just look for load up my default kit here. Okay, so we have our drums that are isolated. So I want to now come over. Let's go to our hit points. And we want to just kind of find our hit points. I'm going to have this track selected. I'm going to choose create MIDI notes. I'm going to retain the dynamics, and let's put it on C1 where this kick drum is. So it's going to create the MIDI information on the first selected track. I'll come over here. So now I'll just turn this up a little bit. And now we're replacing the kick drum with the one from Groove Agent that's automatically been split. So if I select this track and so again, kind of do the unmixing of the song, then choose to unmix the drums, move the cursor to the beginning of where the file is, drag the drums over, do a bounce selection, and then just double click so that we create an audio file, and then do the hit points and create MIDI notes and send that out to the drum instrument that you want. Then you could replace kind of bad drums on a recording years after. Pretty scary that we could do that. All right, we have John McDonough Music checking in from Hamburg, New Jersey. Thanks for joining us today. Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. We have Peter checking in from Montreal. Great to see you on. All right, John McDonough Music says, hi, Greg. How do I get the playback from the cursor instead of the playback jumping to another place as a default? Thanks. All right, so if I'm here, so let's come to your transport menu, and we'll set the start mode. And so if we have like from the selection start, so let's say if I'm here, and now when I go to my transport and we go to start mode, so if I have it set to start from selection, now it'll play from that selection. And if I select a different part, so my play mode will just begin again. So when I hit play, it jumps to that selection. So what you want to do if you want it to follow the cursor is just go to your transport to start mode and choose start from project cursor position. So now if my cursor is here, it's going to play. It'll just follow the cursor. So again, transport, start mode, start from project cursor position. All right, so you see Flyv's transition to his new computer is going well, and he has most of his instruments and effects on the new PC. All right, Michael Teams is granted Jan 1 gallon of Texas strawberry ice cream for his work with the Cubase Nation, or for his work with the CubaseIndex.com. All right, so we have is it Klaus Olsen from Malmo, Sweden. A good friend and used to work at Steinberg, lives in Malmo. Per Larson. All right, always wonderful to see Tiago from Brazil. Thanks for joining us today. And Michael Teams has granted him 1 gallon of French vanilla ice cream. And Kerwin Young has received 1 gallon of tuxedo cream ice cream. All right, artist known as Love is just says, hoping everyone is well. Thank you for everything, Greg. So you're welcome. It's always great to see you on. And he's also is saying he hit the like button. He encourages everyone to hit the like button also. All right. All right, Cooper, I'm going to say Jan from Belgium, upgraded from Pro 13 to Cubase 14 Pro with 30% off. Nice discount. Yeah, make sure you get all of the partner products as well. All right, so we see from Holland TV says this is not a valid email address. Please choose another email address when create Steinberg ID. So if it isn't following like a normal, like your name at with an internet domain, or if perhaps if it's been used already for a Steinberg ID, you could maybe get a message indicating that. All right, so FlyV is just asking, but I must ask, do you know how to get my Tractor S8 motherboard software over to the new machine? So I don't have any Tractor software, so I don't really have any familiarity with it, unfortunately. Sorry about that. If I had it, I would be happy to help. All right, we see Rick from Bratman Studio from Whittier, California. Says clear blue skies with a crisp breeze today. Hope all is well in the streaming world of Club Cubase. Hello to my Zoom buds. It's great to see you on the live stream, and everyone's always jealous of all the great synths and keyboards you have in your studio. Wonderful to see Mark Rabin from Montana on, and he says Stella is saying woof. So everyone give a big woof to Mark's dog, Stella. Beautiful dog. All right. Jazz Dude and others are giving Stella a big woof. All right, so you see from John McDonough Music, says, thanks, Greg, you're the best. Always happy to help. It's nice when you have a one mouse click away from happiness. All right, so we have Bob saying hi. We have Jason Groves says, hi, Greg's greetings from Kentucky. We met at NAMM in 2024, and you figured out how to select multiple tracks and assign them to VCA that was already in the project. Similar to how you'd select multiple tracks, hold Command, Control plus Shift, and assign those to a group or effects group. Thank you again. I hope you're doing well. So great to see you on the live stream. And let me know if there's any other questions that you have. And just curious what part of Kentucky you're in, just so I could visualize it in my head. All right, story du jour says, Greg, it's my birthday, so I'm locked in using Cubase 12 Pro, but how best to get started with Extreme for sound design? Well, happy birthday, first off, and thanks for taking time on your birthday to spend time learning more about Cubase and Steinberg products. So let's take a look at Extreme. I think I have it installed. I think I installed it on the last live stream. But I think one of the cool things is Extreme is runs in Hallian or Hallian Sonic. So as we come over here, let's go ahead and just load up like an Extreme patch. And I think, one of the beauties is, taking an existing patch and then I think that you could, let's just come over, let me resize this a little bit. So and I think that one of the great things, especially I do this in Pad Shop all the time, is just kind of taking an existing patch and just throw a different sample in. So you could adjust kind of the position. So this could be and at that point just kind of tweaking. So, you know, take something. So let's say we'll take a kick sound or a snare. And then start to have all sorts of fun. So, you know, I think a great place to kind of start off with is just kind of taking an existing preset and say, let's drop that. And play around, but you know, try replacing samples, and it's a great way to explore and come up with like new and fresh sounds. Super easy. All right, so you see Mark Raven just saying Stella is happy to receive woofs and woofs back to all those she loves. All right, so we see Jason Groves is from Lexington, Kentucky. Thanks for letting me know so I can envision it in my mind. All right, so he's fascinating to see people from all over the country. So been through let me just clear my throat. I've been through Lexington a couple times. So all right, so Pablo's just saying woo. All right, let's see Jazz Dude sharing some extreme tutorial links. All right, let me just jump to a question that was mailed in. All right, so we had a question, how to control multiple parameters on a track with a single knob. Okay, so let's say we want, we'll just load up, let's say a preset here. So let's say, or I'll do it something a little easier to follow sonically here. Okay, so say we have this particular sound. So one of the cool things is you could use the modulators here to control. So there's what's called a macro knob. And when we come to the macro knob here, we could assign different parameters. So let's say I want to control that parameter here. So let's say, and let's also control maybe the resonance. So we'll add the resonance here. And let's also add some effects to this. So let's say we want to go to an insert. And we want to control, let's say, from our studio delay. And we want to set the amount of the output of the delay. So I'll come here, click. All right, and let's make a EQ sweep. So let's come to our channel EQ, and we will come over here, and say I want to control the channel EQ. All right, so now when I come over, so I have four different parameters. I have the filter, a delay, the EQ, and we want these all to be controlled, all these parameters, through one single knob. So as I play this voice, all of those parameters, let's say I'll adjust the different amount. All four parameters here will adjust based on this moving one knob. Now, if we wanted to control this with a controller, so let's say I have my Korg Nano control, so I'll come over here to the MIDI remote, and let's say, okay, I want to go to my Nano control. Let me just switch to a different mapping page. So I want this knob here to control. So I will come back over to the modulators. I want to control all four of these parameters. I'm going to just right click and we'll say MIDI remote, pick for MIDI remote mapping. I'm going to move this particular knob. So I'm going to say my Korg Nano control. We move this knob and apply the mapping. So now when I play, moving one knob, I could control four or more parameters on that particular track. So let's open up the channel EQ again so you can watch the EQ. So we will open that up one more time. So we'll just and then if we wanted to keep adding, additional slots, we could do that as well. And then if we wanted to, I think we could even come over here. Let's add an LFO, and I want this LFO to control this parameter. So as we play, this LFO is now driving this macro knob, which is driving four different controls. All at once. So all sorts of great, wonderful, creative possibilities that you can access right there. All right, let me jump back to some live questions. All right, so we see Story du jour says, thanks, Greg. Dynamite tips on Extreme. All right, so we see from Flyv, says, that's cool, Greg. At least the MIDI functions work with the faders on pads. Even the lights I set up a long time ago got transferred. So that's great. All right, you see Pablo is going to be invading Texas. So let us know when you're coming. All right. All right, so a question I see from Kavinda Kalanarantha, I guess. It says, hey, Greg, when you create a group channel, I found out when I try to send a different bus to that channel, it allows at last inside group section. Could we reorder the list to show us as we want? So sometimes, all right, so let's say if I have, I'll just jump to a different project here. Okay, so let's say if we want to send like all of these particular tracks. All right, so it says when you create a new group channel, I found out when I tried to send a different bus to that channel, it shows at least inside the group section. Can we reorder the list to shows what we want? All right, so I'll just create a group channel. Let's add a group track. Okay, I want to send, let's take all these drums and I'm going to add a group channel to the selected tracks. All right, so we have, let's say, our drum group, and then all right, so just see when you create a new group channel, I found out when I tried to send a different bus to the channel, it at least shows at last inside group section. Could we reorder the list to shows we want? So I don't think that when we go to our groups here, so let's say if we want to send our groups out, so let's go to our sends. So we could send it directly here, but I don't think that it's going to be, it might be shown as in the order that it was added. So let me just add to other group channels. All right, so we have keys 01, keys 02. So if you want the ability to send, group 1 to, let's say, our different groups. So I don't think that this is a way to be able to reorder the list if that's what you want to be doing. So, but let's say if I come over here to keys 1, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. So let's say if we come here, we could send this to the other groups, but I think it's going to indicate and show in the order of the groups. Let's see if it makes a difference on its physical position. But I think it's going to be in the order that was added. Yeah, so if we take keys 2 here and go to its send, yeah, so it's actually just showing up in the order that's added. So I don't know of a way to, if you want to change the order of the group channels, to change it. All right, so we see from Millard Brown, just says, is there any chance of seeing the Pro Instruments bundle broken up on both install and MediaBay by the individual components, like the Pro Drums bundle? I haven't, it's a product that Steinberg sells for another company, so I don't actually have a license for it. I kind of sent an email earlier. We just kind of completed our end of fiscal year yesterday, so things are a bit chaotic at the office, so I haven't had a chance to actually have access to that particular bundle, unfortunately. So, but I'll keep trying to see if I could get it figured out so that I could take a look at it and have kind of the same experience that you guys are running into. Sorry about that. Not such a satisfying answer. And Millard Brown says it's huge. Yeah, so. All right, so I think we had another question that was mailed in. Okay. All right, so we have a question. It says, "Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. Hate to bother you, but I have an issue that's driving me nuts. I have a huge orchestral template, and when I move the transport around a wheel, or when I click anywhere in the project, Cubase throws a CC1 equals 0 and a CC2 equals 0. I'm putting MIDI flags in every track to counteract this. But it is annoying in preferences. I have never reset chase controllers unclicked. I have chase not limited to part boundaries ticked. I've tried both ways. It's the same. I have no ideas where this is coming from, not from my controller. I've unhooked everything. It still does it. Here's a monitor from a track. It says I press play when it stopped. This is what it showed. 127s are the MIDI flag, but it threw in the zeros before. Any suggestions? I'm available if you want to log into my system and have any times. As many thanks, Craig. So, and it also had mentioned that the controller itself was, was unhooked. So what I would do, just out of curiosity, is, if you have in all MIDI inputs as the MIDI input source here. So let's say if we go to a MIDI track, if it is set to in all MIDI inputs as our input source, so when we come here, we'll say all MIDI inputs, I would check to make sure that when you go into your studio menu to the studio setup, that we want to go to the MIDI port setup and check all of these devices here in the MIDI port setup and see, one, if you have something, sometimes you may have like a software controller or maybe inside of your template an instrument that has a MIDI output port. It could be something like when we add Groove Agent, we could set as the input port. So if you have this set specifically to your controller, so I wonder if it's maybe a VST instrument or perhaps a MIDI plugin, but I would think maybe a MIDI instrument that generates and can transmit MIDI information back, that maybe it's doing a reset and transmitting that back. So try to, again, if you go to your studio setup, if you're using in all MIDI inputs, try to isolate these particular uncheck ones that you are using for your in all MIDI inputs for your controller here. And if it's some that you don't necessarily use, I think that you could isolate it to find out if it's coming from a particular MIDI input port from the in all MIDI inputs, and then you could isolate it probably to a particular instrument or a controller that's transmitting the unnecessary MIDI information. So I would give that a try. All right. Sorry. All right, let me just... All right, so we see Pablo is just saying, I forgot my 2 questions. Embarrassing. Bo. Yeah, hopefully it'll come back to you. All right, so we have a question from Bob who asks, is there a way to assign hi-hat rolls to keys? For example, hit one key and have a triplet, or hit another key and have a double hit, etc. So sometimes it can be part of the instrument itself. So let's say I want to come over and we will open up like a full Groove Agent instance. So it's not in SE, but if you have a full Groove Agent, we'll show you it's going to have a performance section. So let me load a quick kit. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. Let me move my... So let's say I want to do like a note repeat. Then I want to just kind of trigger this particular element. So in the full Groove Agent, if we go to the Performance tab, we could come over here and then we could just activate different keys. So I'm going to come over here and say, okay, I want to put in eighth notes. So I come over here, I'm just going to put a different key. And let's say I want to do triplets, so I could select this, and we'll double click on our transmission key. And let's say we want to do 16th notes. I could put it on this particular key, and we'll do 16th note. Let's do 32nd notes. Okay, so now as I come over here, so now I could just play the note and it's going to do and I'll just assign my triplets here. So let's say I want my 16th note triplet, so I can play the note, and let's say I want this to be on G2 or G, let's say G4. Okay, so now as I just hit the snare, and then when I hit these particular notes on my MIDI controller, then I'm able to just, so at this point we could just choose to do, let's make this like 30-second notes. All right, so now, all right, so I'll take this from 128th notes down, let's say 30 seconds. All right, so now as I play, so that's one way of doing it. So if you have Groove Agent, you could do that with like hi-hats. And do kind of note repeats. If it's on its own track, what you could do is also just come over here. So let's say we have snare. If we go to like a MIDI insert, we could also just come over here. There's a MIDI echo. So let's say I don't want to do any pitch offset. So we can say, okay, I want this to be a 30-second note delay. So I could come over here and how many repetitions that you want it to be. So let's say we want to do 8 repetitions. So using a MIDI echo plugin, that you could set that up as well. And so let's say if I want one MIDI echo here to be at 16th notes, and I want another MIDI echo to be at 32nd notes. So let's say no pitch offset here. Let's come over and make this 32nd. So now you could just kind of come over here and I think that we could And you might be able to even come over, let's say if we want to do quick controls to turn this on and off. Let's see if we could right click. So if we want to, so you could even set it up for quick controls to turn off different MIDI echoes if you want to kind of play around with that. So that's one of the ways you could do to kind of do hi-hat rolls to different keys. All right, wonderful to see Vishnu from India on. His question is, can we change the time base of events in Cubase like tracks? We could do it for audio, but MIDI is going to be based upon the actual track setting. So if we have a drum loop, we'll come over. Okay, so I'm going to just select this particular track here. Let me just, and we'll put this into musical mode so it's going to automatically kind of fit. So I'll slow down. All right, and let me just go to a MIDI part. So let's add an instrument track. All right, and I'll just do quick MIDI bass part here. All right, let me just put it on quarter notes. Okay, so let's say we're playing these together. All right, so now if I change the tempo, let's say from 88 to 96, they're both going to change. All right, so let's put this into a quick loop. All right, so if we want, so right now, if I change the tempo, this will not, so if I wanted this track, this MIDI track, I'll select this MIDI track and we'll put it into time base mode. So it's going to be at the track level, but we could also, so now if I change, the drums have sped up and not the bass. But when this track is placed into musical mode, we can now, I'll just jump back to original tempo. That those would automatically sync. Now, something else that you could do if you didn't want a particular, like one event to not follow the tempo changes, is that you could lock its position. So just right from the info line. And now when the particular track is in musical mode, as we adjust the tracks here and we adjust the tempo, we could see that these particular tracks aren't going to necessarily, that event could be locked, that event's position could be locked in. So even if I wanted the other tracks, so I come over here, I change my tempo. So we could just simply lock that one single event in. But for MIDI, it's going to be For the audio, it's going to be the events themselves can be set to musical mode or not to musical mode. And for MIDI, it's going to be done on the track level, but it could be locked for position. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenin checking in from Finland. I think we're finally all back on where all the time zones are in sync with daylight savings time, or daylight saving time. Okay. All right, Bone Splitter just says, "Hi Greg, can you teach me how to make a clean sine wave using Retrologue for sub-bass purposes?" Okay, so let's just add a new Retrologue instance. All right, so we'll come over here. So when we kind of start off, we'll just say, okay, we want to do so we're going to just, as we start from instance, we could just, okay, I think that this will be, and then if you wanted to do chorus tuning, you want to adjust the octave. Fine tuning as well. And there's also, if you wanted to adjust, have kind of random phase, if you wanted this to be like a multi oscillator as well, we could so if you wanted to so you have different and then you could start adjusting. So if you wanted to or crossover, and then if you wanted to add like a sub oscillator, we could just kind of come right over here. But if you want a bass, it's just going to kind of fill and just kind of stay there. You could try stuff like that. All right, so we see from Mark Raven, says, "Greg, so I'm getting better at drums, but I'm not great yet. And I noticed a few things I think can help. I want to share with others what I'm finding to be helpful using my eDrums through Groove Agent 5. Vintage kit expansion. When I play eDrums, I get some latency. My question is simple. If I move the track backwards by the latency buffer, will I be in sync? Basically, I'm finding my drums are late. I should say any Groove Agent 5 eDrum hints are encouraged, and we probably could benefit, in my honest opinion. There's sounds from Retrologue. Remind me of the dentist. All right. So, okay. So when we come, so let's say if we're working with, I'll open up the vintage kit in Retrologue here, or in Groove Agent rather. All right, so I'll do it in Groove Agent SE for those who have Groove Agent SE instead. All right, so let's take a look at we'll load up the vintage kit. I think I have it installed. or it might be just part of the full groove agent, but let's okay, so let's load up our vintage kit and let's see if Mark provided just a preset. Okay, so let's say we'll open up this particular kit. Okay, so I will all right, so when you're running into latency, all right, so there's a few things. Says when I play E drums, I get some latency. My question is simple. If I move the track backwards by the buffer, will I be in sync? Basically, I'm finding my drums are late. So determine if the drums are late when they are recorded or when you're playing the drums if they are late. So right now, I can see that my drums are pretty responsive overall. So if I was to play, and you can probably hear me hitting the controller, and if I open up, let's say, you know, if I come over here, as we go to my particular MIDI controller here, I'll just put this on all MIDI inputs, so that when I hit like my Q key here, so I'm not really getting latency. Now, what can cause latency can be kind of created by two different areas. One can be that the buffer size of your audio interface. So the higher the buffer size for your interface, the more latency we have. So if I go to my control panel and I adjust my buffer to 2048 samples, you could probably hear the click on my computer keyboard slightly before, and that latency could throw it off. Now, let's say I have a track of audio. Let's say that your buffer size is like within kind of typical latency realms. Another thing that could throw off tracks is when we come over, so I'll just jump this back to 256. All right, so if I have, let's say, another audio track, so right now, I click and we could see that this is going to be, the latency is not so much of an issue. But if I have a plugin on another track, so plugins are also a culprit. So let's say I add a group track or just an audio track, and on this audio track as an insert, I have, let's say, a high latency plugin like the vocal chain. So this is doing a tremendous amount of work. So now when I play, and let me go ahead and just add a couple more instances of the vocal chain that the plugins themselves can be causing latency. So when we want to go ahead and play, it could be that the other plugins in the project are causing the latency. So what you could do is just come right over here and try to just activate the constrained delay compensation. And what that could do is basically bypass plugins that are causing a lot of latency. So you have to figure out if the latency is what you're hearing back as you're playing. That would be my guess, that you're hearing it and that the track itself is recorded in time. Then I wouldn't shift any of the tracks. Now recording it, because you're listening to it as you're playing it in from your electronic drum kit, you know, that may affect your performance. But I think if you actually solve what the problem is, that when you solve the problem, at that point, you'll probably find that it's going to be a plugin that's kind of bumping the latency up. that's distracting you, and that the drums are being recorded correctly, but it's just on the monitoring path with those plugins activated, that is what is causing the latency. So check that out. All right. All right, so you see from Vishnu says, thanks a lot, Greg. When scoring films, I just want to put the events locked to scenes and change the tempo. Locking will help, I think. So, you know, if it's, so let's say if I have like MIDI events here. So let's say I have, I'll import a quick video file. So I'll just come right over here. Let me just import video file. Sorry. Okay, and let's say I want to, we'll just add a quick pad shop type sound. Okay, so let's say we have our video going on. So, you know, if you want, like, if you don't want the events to react to tempo changes, which sounds like is your case, put that into that particular track into linear time base. So let's say we open up our video window. So I'll come right over here. Let's get to our video player. So let's say, I want this note to start like right as this cloud comes in. So let's say right there. So I want to create a MIDI note. And then one of the great things if you're working with video is you could actually just say video follows editing on and off. So I could just kind of draw a note in here. And once we kind of draw a note, what we could do is as I move this particular note, we could just see, okay, I want this note to start when the cloud's like right there. Okay, so I'm going to enlarge the part. Okay, so now when we come over and I'll just play this with the video, as soon as that cloud comes in, we could have that automatically sync. So if I change the tempo, so let's say at this point I adjust my tempo since this track isn't in linear mode, isn't in musical mode. So let's say I drop in a groove agent groove here. Okay. All right, so say I have something that's aligned to the grid here. So I'll go to my pattern. Let me just. I'll just turn that down to kill. Sorry. All right, so I'm here and I have this pattern that's playing back in time. So this particular track here is going to be in musical mode. So when I change my tempo, that's almost like I planned it. All right, so say if I come and adjust my tempo, since this track is in musical mode, this track is in linear mode, that when I change my tempo here, so let's say I go from 100 to 100 and 120. That this will play back sped up. So let's just find so we could have this playback at the faster tempo. And even though I changed the meter, I changed the tempo, we're going to see. All right, so when we have that cloud kind of come, that still plays back regardless of whatever tempo I have. So this is reacting, the position is reacting to the time and not the tempo. So again, if I slow down the tempo, my drums are going to slow down because that track is in linear mode. This is going to stay at that same time position every single time. So just have one track in linear, one track in musical. The linear modes are tied to like the timing of the events. The linear mode you could change and speed up the tempo without having it, and it will base, as you make changes, it's based upon the tempo as opposed to the song position or the project, the actual time position. All right. All right, so we have DJ Ride says, in the MediaBay preview window on the right-hand side, notice that you can't change the key of all samples unless there's metadata in the wave. Yeah, so it's going to be like a project root key that we use for that. So it's, you know, but if we want it to come over, so let's say if we're previewing, you know, if it's an instrument sound, you're able to kind of preview. So let's say if we come over to, just find something that would probably have some root key info. So let's come over to, I think maybe some loop mash. All right, so when we come over here, let's say, okay, I want to do, all right, so let's say if we have, so if it doesn't have like the root key within a particular file, it doesn't know how much it, you know, because what you're setting is the root key not to go up by a semitone or a perfect fifth or a major third. You're setting it to go from a project root key of C to E. So it needs to have that particular information to know what the project root key. So it's not necessarily a preview of transposing, but it's going to be a preview of the particular defined root key. So that's why it needs that information from the original root key to know much how to stretch it or how much to transpose the audio file. And we see just probably a follow-up question from DJ Ride. Is there a way of doing this automatically for every file? So there isn't a way to, for, you know, you could probably, you know, it's not a way of doing it automatically for every file. And that's why sometimes when you get the Steinberg content, the material that is set up for, you know, doing like, you know, the content loops as opposed to other loops, you know, these loops will have that particular metadata. So if we come over to arpeggio, that this will automatically transpose correctly based upon the root key. So when you know, when you buy like a Steinberg content set, it, you know, for anything that's melodic will have that information embedded. So most audio companies will set, it's very common for them to have a project root key as part of the metadata. And if you buy a sample library from someone that doesn't, I would just, you know, say, hey, this would be really cool if you could actually set the root key. It'd be really helpful. So it's kind of a limitation of whoever's providing that particular content for you. They you know, if they're going through and adding tempo metadata, you know, they could add the project root key very easily. So, but there isn't a way to automatically set it. So you may have to do it manually if the content provider hasn't done that for you. All right, so we have another question from Vishnu. It says, how can I transfer all my Cubase 13 Pro macros, key commands, and preferences to Cubase 14 Pro? So it should automatically carry over. If for some reason it doesn't, all you'd have to do is go to your edit menu, go to the profile manager, export from your Cubase 13, and then import it into your Cubase 14 from the same location. All right, so we see JVI asks, Greg, question. Instrument track, I choose MIDI controller 1 as input, so not all MIDI, then keyboard 1 controls the instrument, but the sustain pedal from controller 2 still works. How to fix? All right, I don't have a... All right, so let's say if... let me see if I have something... All right, so it says, let me see if I have a way of doing this. Let me get another little MIDI controller out. Hang on one second, and I'll see if I could test it. Okay, so I have another little controller here, so let's see if it shows up. All right, so it should be like a little Korg Nano key. All right, so now I have my pad shop, and I'll just do this. Maybe let me load up a different instrument. All right, so let's say I have this track. We're going to add, let's say, my panorama, and let me hit the sustain pedal. All right, so I hit the sustain pedal now. Release. All right, and I'm going to switch the input here to the Korg Nano key, and I play the chord. And the sustain pedal is not coming through, so I'm going to come here, hit the sustain pedal, release the keys. But if I switch it over to the panorama MIDI input port, let's set it to all MIDI input ports. So I come here, we say all MIDI input ports. I hold this, I'm triggering it from my panorama, my Nectar controller. And I hit the sustain, let go. Now if I play the notes from my Korg Nano key, and all MIDI inputs is on, the sustain is coming through the Nectar controller. I release the key, my sustain pedal from the Nectar controller. So that's, but if I switch this entirely to the nano key as the input, I hit the sustain pedal now, release the keys, release. So the sustain is not coming through. So even if I now want to come over, let's open up just the MIDI monitor. So I will come over to my MIDI monitor and I play the notes here. Hold the sustain pedal. So note on, note off. If I switch my input here to my panorama, you can see the controller coming in, coming out. So as I just hold that down, if I set this to all MIDI inputs, I can, but if I set this just to the Korg Nano key as the input, at this point, it's not going to, so I'm just going to keep this going. We switch the input to Nano key. Since the sustain pedal is going into the Korg Nano, or going into the Nectar, it's not coming in. As soon as I set this sustain pedal to go through the panorama, we see that, or through all MIDI inputs. And if I set this to the Korg Nano key, then that sustain pedal, which you can probably hear my foot hitting, isn't coming through. So it seems like that's working as expected for me. Let me know if it's behaving differently, but it seems like it's working as I would expect. All right, we see Mark Raven says, thank you, Greg, and everyone. And Greg, the kid is not the issue, it's me. All right, and Pablo is saying he loves the drums, he uses a lot. And Mark is giving thanks to Pablo for the hint. All right, wonderful to see Case Mundi on for Monday from Houston, Texas, I believe. All right, it says when I go to apply direct offline processing in Nuendo 14, if I don't render the files in place first, they get massively blown out, regardless of which plugin I'm doing. Bug or bad workflow problem. So let me know what you mean by massively blown out, but let's take a look at it. All right. All right, let's see if I have this kind of set up in my control room. All right, so let's say we'll just do this and just place this into musical mode quickly. All right, so let's come over and I'm going to hit F7 to open direct. Sorry, just annoying. I just had to switch keyboards. My other one died, so let me just go to my direct offline processing here. All right, so we will go ahead and play this file. All right, so we have this. I'll turn the volume down here. All right, so I'm not sure if we have pin processor, if we go to auto apply, so let's say I want to do, let's just say a fade out. All right, so that kind of worked as expected to me. All right, so let's try it with a plug-in. Let's put something that's easy to hear. Let's say flanger. So it seems to be kind of working as I would expect case, but it says if I don't render the files in place first. So let me know if you're, so let's say if I don't do, let's say I remove this process. So we have this, let's add a plugin. Do phaser. All right, so if we want to make adjustments here, so let's say, and then I just apply. So let me know what you mean exactly by massively blown out regardless of which plugin I'm doing. And let me know if that's kind of the method that you're using, Case. And, you know, if you give me a little more information, I could see, but it seems like it's kind of working as I would expect it to. Okay. So Mark Rabin says he's using the Simon Phillips Vintage Kit. All right, so we see from Pastoral Apologetics, it says, I still can't get an entire track region to fill with the colors. Some of it stays gray no matter how I try, specifically the area where I can solo mute, etc. All right, so I'll just make sure, so if it's like this area here, like these particular track colors, so let's say I have this track color and we will hold down the option key, so I want this track to be red. So when we come over here, we can see that this is going to be red. So if this is the color area that you want to fill, you'd go to your settings or preferences and you go to user interface. You'll see track and mix console channel colors, and I think that if you uncheck tracks, that now there's no color for the track, so this track color doesn't have any impact. But with this checked, you can now hit apply, and now you'll see that the track colors will be carried over. If it is, you know, with an event, so let's say if you want to, you know, colorize, let's say, you know, if you have an event that's muted and we change the colors here, so let's say I make this kind of bluish, you know, if the event is kind of white, this area will be white, indicating that it's muted. But if it's for, and I'm thinking maybe when you mention specifically the area where I could solo mute, etc., that's going to be this. Again, go to your preferences or settings, and under user interface, track and mix console channel colors, and just make sure that tracks are checked. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. And thanks for being on. It's from Southeast Texas. All right. All right, we see Mark Rabin just says, oh, thank you, Greg. So. All right, so we see I also got a totally new layout for my keyboard. How can I set up the quick controls, also play and record? So if you want like the transport controls, so if depending on your keyboard, you know, any of them can be set just by coming over. So if we go to your key commands, go to Edit. If you're on Windows or Windows or Mac, you go to Edit menu to key commands, and then you could look at probably under Transport, and we could set the key commands directly here. So if you go under the Transport category, now if you have a numeric keypad, so by default you have like your space bar will be start and stop. You could also, if you have a numeric keypad, you could hit the enter key for play, the 0 key for stop, and then if you want to hit the period key by default, that will go to the beginning of the song. 1 will take you to the left locator. So let's say if I have a left and right locator, I hit 2 for the right locator. 3 could take me to locator 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you hit the asterisk key, that could put you into record. So if you have a numeric keypad, there's a lot of default. Transport functions there, but you could also change any of the keyboard shortcuts just by going into the key commands and look into the transport category. There's a lot of user assignable key commands, as you can see. All right, so you see from Mark Rabin says, okay, I'm going to play with it after the stream. I'll let you know more on Friday, but you're intuitively correct. I played with Groove Agent Pattern, then I tracked all the other parts and then tried to add E-drums. So yeah, you might run into it if you have a lot of plugins that are already kind of set to be utilized in the project. So okay, so we see Vishnu says, thank you, Greg, for the detailed explanation. So I hope it makes sense. All right, so DJ Ride says, all the Cubase samples are fine. It's when you get a file from third-party sample packs. And that's with the project root key. So there's a lot of third-party sample packs that have project root key. It's a standard metadata field for sample packs. I would call them, if you buy a third-party sample pack, just call them up and tell them you want them to generate the root key because they probably know what it is already. And tell them you may not want to do business if they're not doing it. But there are third-party sample packs that have the project root key information. Okay. All right. All right. Mark Rabin is saying his dog Stella is giving you the sad eyes. She's begging you. She pleads with you. She salivates and whimpers, and all she wants is for you to hit the like button. Woof. All right. See, Mark Rabin had snow this morning in Montana, but it was almost 70 degrees Fahrenheit a few days ago. So, yeah, we had about a 20-degree temperature drop from yesterday to today as well. All right, wonderful to see Randy from ProWatch DFW. Thanks for joining us today. It's great to see you and hang out with you on the Zoom meetup. All right, we have Sway TV and Recording Studio saying hi to everyone. Bob sent me a wonderful recording he did. Shared that with me. Thank you so much for sending that over. All right, wonderful to see Daniel checking in from Croatia. See Randy saying some cool stuff in the sale. So yeah. All right, so you see JVI says, sustained from 2 controllers, follow-up, no ideas why it happens to me. It's always happened to me from Cubase 5 onwards. I'll check the MIDI monitor to in MIDI inserts. Thanks for now. Yeah, so it seems to kind of, filter out anything that's not coming from that. Maybe if you have two of the same controllers, maybe it's getting mixed up, or if they're going into like a MIDI interface of some kind and that is merging multiple inputs. So it could be a couple of things like that. All right, so we see that in Croatia it's a bit cold, a bit hot, and rainy. All right. And we see JVI says, I'll add this. It's irritating when I do my piano lessons with my students, the pedal controller to taking over my controller, in case you're wondering why it's a problem. So make sure that, if it is, make sure that the output of, sometimes, in the old days when people had lots of MIDI keyboards or MIDI devices, people would often take the output of one keyboard into the input of another keyboard to play the sounds, and that could transmit, if that's the case, if the MIDI out is going from one controller to the input of another controller, that would pass over the sustain pedal messages to it. So, but if they're both connected to separate ports, or if they're using USB, like independent USB drivers to the computer, it shouldn't. All right. Okay, so we see Flyvy, Vince just asking, where can I find key commands to put on my device's pitch shift and modulation wheel? They are red and don't move. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's going to be on a MIDI device. We could put, if we go to, let's say, a quick MIDI remote here. Let me just switch this out. All right, so, if you go to kind of like this, let's just kind of look over here. So I'm not sure if it's in the MIDI remote that you're speaking of, but let's say if we are here, let me just say, okay, we're going to select our Nectar P4. Let's say we're building it. We could have kind of like, if you wanted to have like different functions here. So let's say if you wanted to just have like a pitch bend wheel that is just kind of laid out for you. You could have like different events here. So let's say if you want your modulation wheel, I think that these are intended more for like as you go to add them in, so that it could look exactly like your MIDI controller. So let's say if we come over here, that we could have, just if we wanted to make it look like, the realistic control of the MIDI controller. So like we could add, different keys if we wanted to, and these don't necessarily have any impact, but can just kind of help with the visual representation so that it looks exactly like your MIDI controller. So let me know if this is kind of what you're talking about, Vince. Okay, so we see from Mr. Beer or Buyer, is there any option in Cubase to make other MIDI parts visible in the editor but not editable, so I can see them as ghost notes while working on the active part? So if you wanted to see the other parts, so if we have editing, so let's come over here and just say, let me find. Yeah, I'll take a look at this. All right, so if I want to, let's say, look at my violin, my viola, let's say we'll look at violin, cello. I'll just hold down the correct modifier. And yeah, okay, so let's say we want to look at my violin and cello parts together. So if we hit like Command E, so now I could edit these two different parts, and how we could switch is we could just come right over here, and I'm going to change these parts that we colorize by part. So now I can edit all of my, so now we see that I could see the violin part, and this is my cello part. Now if I click, I could just switch as to make one the active voice and one the kind of visual voice. So right now I could see the violin. So when I look at different functions like velocity, I'm seeing the velocity for the violin. When I click and select a particular event here, now you can see that the cello parts are there. And let's just see if we want to like lock, if there's a, not sure if there's a lock for those, but so the intention is that you could easily kind of navigate between the two parts. So just select both parts, and then whichever one is selected, you'll see that color kind of pop. And if you just go to the colors menu, when editing, I like to have the parts automatically shown just to differentiate between the multiple events. So it doesn't necessarily lock it, but this would allow you to just easily switch back and forth. So I'm not editing the velocity of my violin when the cello is selected. So I go to my violin part, we can see that those velocities will remain intact. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, DJ Ride asks, how do you bulk export different versions of your mastering, say about 3 versions in different formats for each? All right, so let's say if I want to come over here, say we got Cubase Pro, let's say if I want to do my export audio mix down, I will come over here and let's make this our active part. All right, so say we have just a small section here. So we have our left and right locators. So if I wanted to export it to different file formats and different resolutions, different sample rates, if we go to our file menu, we could go to export audio mixdown, and we have this thing called an export queue. So you may see this little export queue here. And what we could do now is just come over and we will say, okay, I want to do my stereo out. I want this to be a 16-bit 44.1. All right, once I do that, I add it to the queue. I want it to be a 24-bit 44.1. Let's add it to the queue. I want it to be a MP3 at 320k kilobaud per second at 44.1. I'll add it to the queue. I want it to be a WAV file that is 96k and 32-bit floating point. Add it to the queue. And now all we would have to do is start the queue export, and I could save these to different folders if I wanted to. Each of these could be going to a different location, a different path, or it could defaultly go to the mixdown folder, and then I could just click on start queue export, and then we would see all of these different functions, all these different file formats automatically just export one after the other, after the other, after the other in kind of an automated fashion. Okay, so we see FlyV just says my save as button on my controller isn't working. Why might that be? All right, so make sure that, you know, if you have a controller that has buttons on it and you're like, okay, I want to use this button for a particular function. Sometimes not all buttons transmit MIDI information. So see if when you actually, like if I come over here, I'll just connect something quickly here. You know, so if I want to actually see, you know, go to like the MIDI information, you know, or go to the MIDI monitor. So let's say, okay, I'm going to add a MIDI track. All right. And, you know, the MIDI monitor is going to be your friend under MIDI inserts. So as soon as you come over here, just start hitting the buttons and you can see if it's actually transmitting a particular MIDI interface. So I'm going to set this to all MIDI inputs. So when I hit something, I could actually see what information is being transmitted when you hit particular functions. If you don't see MIDI information coming in by default, it could be that that is a function that's tied into software and doesn't actually transmit MIDI information. So check to see if it's actually going to transmit MIDI information or not. So most controllers, everything will send a MIDI message, and that's kind of the communication language between the controller and functionality. But sometimes something will just be hardwired directly into a particular piece of hardware that's not intended to be transmitted out, that's tied into saving as within a particular application. So check to see if it's actually transmitting a MIDI message, and then it should be freely assignable anywhere that you want. Okay, so we see from Kay, says regarding his earlier comment, I'll email you some screen grabs. It says, yeah, that's the method I'm using. At first I thought it was an Isotope RX problem, but it also happens in Steinberg plugins. Yeah, so yeah, send me the screenshot and be happy to look at it for you. It's great to see you on the live stream, Case. Hope you and your family are well. All right, we see Sable Winters on. She's like number 89. Thanks for that, Sable. Appreciate it. Sable saying a big hello to Stella with a big woof. All right. All right, so we have official Manny Sounds asks, please, how does one use pitch bend well from Cubase? Okay, so with pitch bend's always kind of a bit of a different, technically it's not a MIDI continuous controller, it's a MIDI, I believe it would be under MIDI system common message. So let's come over, we'll do just new. Now, and what's interesting about pitch bend, other than, you know, most values we could have like 0 through 127 for values. So I'll just add an instrument track here. Let's add a Retrologue. All right. Pitch bend is actually kind of a 14-bit MIDI message, so you have 16,384. So if you wonder how they came up with that number for pitch bend, we could think of it as 128 times 128. So MIDI is all kind of binary in itself with language. Now, when we set up pitch bend, what we want to do is to make sure that the pitch bend range. So if we draw pitch bend in on a part, I'll just come over. Let's just find a quick patch here. All right, so now I'll come over and I'll just... All right, so right now, what's unique about pitch bend is we could draw pitch bend data in. So we'll select, and we'll see that kind of like poly pressure or aftertouch. We see pitch bend kind of separated because technically it's not a MIDI continuous controller. So that's a good MIDI test trick question. All right, so a lot of times when we draw in pitch bend, people will just kind of draw pitch bend in. So let's say we want our pitch bend to increase over time. All right, so but if our pitch bend range is set to 3 semitones, it would set a different amount here. And if our pitch bend is set, let's say to up, if we have it set to an octave, we could take the same exact information, an octave up and an octave down, and this is going to be set in the instrument that's receiving the pitch bend. So it's not necessarily a global Cubase thing. So we'll hear more of a pitch bend. Because the pitch bend range of the instrument, so it's the same data, but it's going from here to here, and instead of doing 3 semitones, it's doing 12 semitones. So the trick that we want to do with pitch bend is just to make sure that we're matching our pitch bend data with what is set in the instrument. So a lot of times, many instruments may be set to either an octave or pitch bend up and down, let's say by 2. So when we go to our pitch bend data, we could click on our setup of our pitch bend, and we could basically match our pitch bend range up and down with what is in the particular instrument. And then we could also show our semitone grid. Okay, so I will come over, and now we could see that when we have our pitch bend, that now we have our middle point. And before, people would always run into scenarios where as they draw in pitch bend, they would do a little bit of pitch bend and they try to zero it out. And sometimes they wouldn't exactly hit 0. And then their MIDI track was slightly out of tune. So again, what we're going to do is go to your pitch bend setup. We're going to show our semitone grid. And now we can see that, okay, we're going from here to here is 1 semitone. From here to the top is another semitone. When we go downward, we can see this horizontal line here. That's 1 semitone down. We go to the bottom, that's 2 semitones down. So as I draw in pitch bend, we could also snap. So I could say, okay, we're going to start at -2, and then at this point, I want to be back to 0, and then we're going to go up 2 semitones, and then let's say up 2 semitones, down, and we could snap the pitch bend to the particular pitches so that when we do this, it's going to be in tune. So now when we listen to it, we'll hear it start from 2 semitones down to go up to 0, where it's in tune, to go up to 2, down 1, and down to our resolving pitch. So match up the pitch bend setup here with your values found in the instrument. And then if you want to make sure that you don't draw in a pitch bend that's out of tune, try clicking on this icon, and that would allow you to snap the pitch bend to particular pitch value so that you know it's actually going to be in tune as expected. All right. All right, let me just find my chat field jumped on me. All right. All right, so we have James Daly is JR checking in from Vancouver, California. Thanks for joining. All right, Mark Rabin just says a couple things I have found really helpful lately is function velocities, percentage, if this helps so much on hi-hat. Yeah, so let's say we want to, come over and take a look at, like, especially hi-hats and drums can be, like, almost like a lot of times, very much like dead giveaways. So let's say we want to take a drum part and let's use percentages on hi-hats to make it sound a little more realistic. So let's start with Groove Agent. We'll do Groove Agent SE, why not? Okay, let's load up. I think both Pablo and Mark Raven are using the vintage kit from Simon Phillips. Maybe I don't have it on. Okay, I'll just load up Simon Phillips kit here. Okay, so let's say we want to put in kind of super generic drum pattern here. And let's show you how we could take kind of a generic drum pattern, and I could do this in the drum editor, and these principles will be applied to the pattern editor as well. All right, so we'll put this into a quick loop. All right, so let's say we want to put in, as we're working, let's say a bass drum. We'll do kind of just a generic drum sound here. So let me just turn off. All right, so say we have kind of generic, and now I'm going to put in, let's say, closed hi-hats here. Make it 16ths. So what makes the drums kind of sound not necessarily so great and kind of artificial is just the hi-hats. So if we kind of mute the hi-hats, we can, it would sound much better. So I'm going to look at just the velocity of my hi-hats. So one of the tricks that we could do is say, okay, I want to take, let's go to like the MIDI logical editor. All right, and I'm going to set it up so that we're going to transform, and we'll say type is equal to note. And we could even just come over here and say our subtype, we're going to say, all right, and especially if you have like hundreds of bars of the drum pattern, and we'll say our pitch is going to equal, let's say F#1. And what I want to do is we're going to take the velocity. So we'll say our action target here, we're going to choose velocity. And we could also come right over here, and let's say I want to take, so let's say I want to take every other note. So I'm going to come here and let's say last event, and we can say every other event. We're going to choose our event counter, and I'll choose 2. So we're going to say we're going to take every other note, the velocity, and let's subtract 30 from the velocity value. So I'll come over here, let's say 30. All right, so now kind of as we're playing, if I did this right, let me make sure. It's on. So now just adjusting the velocity of those particular notes, you could hear. And if I wanted to do that again, so let's say I could just select these hi-hats. So just changing the velocity of every other note can make a huge difference in the feel of the part. Now something else we could do is also we could come over here and we could choose velocity variance. So I could say, okay, I just want like every other note to kind of be down, and this way we could choose different velocity values. So you could come up with interesting parts like that. Or let's say we want to also, let's make it kind of straight, is play probability. So let's say we kind of vary, but we could now come over here and adjust kind of play probability for different notes. So we can say, okay, I want to, sometimes I want only the downbeats to have high play probability. And other notes, we can say play this note 40% of the time, play this note all of the time. So those are some cool tricks that you could do to make hi-hats kind of more realistic and more musical without having to be like an amazing drummer or programmer. Okay. All right, so Sable Winters just says, I cannot for the life of me set up my MIDI controllers in Cubase. I always have to start over putting knobs and keys and sliders. Takes real focus and patience. Am I wrong, or am I simply impatient? So once you have the MIDI remote set up, it should be just able to be accessed here. So something that you could try, Sable, if the remote control is not showing up as expected, go to your settings. So let's say if we come right over here, we'll see the little settings icon. Just come over here, click on the scripts tab, try to export the script, and then just simply import the same script if it doesn't show up again. So try that. So again, click here on within the MIDI remote on the setup wheel, click on the scripts tab, export the script, and then try to re-import it again and see if it shows up as you expect. All right, so Peter is sending his greetings from Montreal, Canada. All right, so we see from Flyv says the MIDI monitor is seeing me hit save as, but isn't doing anything. So I guess new PC doesn't offer that function. So yeah, most, like, you know, if it's on the PC, you know, if it's like a button that's on, you know, if it's like a MIDI controller, like the save as button, you know, should be tied in. If it's a button on a computer keyboard, try coming to the key commands here and then see if you could just kind of select. So let's say you want to search for save as. So if it's on the computer keyboard, you know, try coming over here, and then when you click, then you could just hit the particular button and see if it's being used. Not all keys on the computer keyboard are kind of user addressable. Like the Windows key is kind of tied directly. If you're on a PC platform, the Windows key is tied directly onto the operating system, and it's not an assignable keyboard shortcut. But if it's like an actual computer keyboard, try just clicking here. So that's not going to transmit MIDI information. That's going to just transmit the keyboard shortcut right here. So sorry if I misunderstood, Vince. see Mark Raven just saying how many hours of Club Cubase install is watched. All right. See, Bass Guy is just saying, can someone give me Cubase 14 LE upgrade? So, yeah, I mean, take a look at the current sale that's going on. All right, we see Randy Lee back. He had to change his computer. All right, so we see Val from Vienna is on. He's late to the party, but he was like number 100. All right, so we see from Sway TV and Recording Studios, just says in export queue, when exporting multiple files / formats, can you rename each file so after export I can identify the files from each other? Yeah, so let's say I want to take just this particular file here. Okay, and I will export the files directly back in. So I'm going to set my left and right locators. Let's come over and I'll just copy. I'll do a new project here. Okay, so let's create empty. I want to put it on April 1st, 2025. Okay. Okay, so I'll just copy over a quick drum part here. We'll export it to multiple formats with the name. All right, so let's say okay, so we'll take. All right, let me just adjust my tempo up here. I'll just drag it to the right track this time. All right. Okay, so I want to take this file and let's do a Q export on it. All right, and I'll just go ahead and import these files into the same project. All right, so I'm going to come over here. Let's do an export audio mixdown. So we want to give it each kind of unique names. So we'll say drums 1644 1 wave. Okay, so I'm going to just come over here. Let's say 44.1 hertz, 16-bit. Let's add it to the queue. So now I want to switch it to a 24-bit 44.1. So I'll just say, let's name this one 24. Add it to the queue. All right, let's say we want this to be 2448. Add to queue. Let's make this an MP3. All right, so let's add that to the queue. All right, so now we will come right back over here. Let's go ahead and run. We'll start our queue export. All right, let's look in the project folder. Let me just check make sure I saved it in the right folder. Here, let me save the project here. Okay. Okay, so let me just all right, let me just check my project folder here one more time. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so now we will come here to our mixdown folder, and we can see that the names are carried over. So we say 1644 one wave, 2441 wave, 2448 one wave, and our MP3 44.1. So at this point, so just when you do the batch export or the Q export, every one of these files can have its own unique name, so that when they're exported, all the names can be retained and put into the mixdown folder of the particular project. So we can see this is our project folder, and when we did the mixdowns are automatically added. So doing that one queue, and you could save each of those as a preset within the project export queue. And now we can just come right over and have all those files in one folder, unified folder for your mixdowns. Sorry for losing my path on that, Bob. Michael Teams is granted Sable Winters 1 gallon of Cherry's Jubilee ice cream. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Let me catch up. All right, so you see Val just saying, got my fingers on Cubasis 3 today for iOS. How do we share projects? Is there a cloud? So you could do that. You could export it to iCloud if you wanted to, and then or any kind of cloud-based service, and then once you're here, you just say you want to, may not have it installed here, but you could just import your Cubasis projects. So once you kind of have it installed, you'll see like your Cubasis projects. I don't have it on my new computer. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely, who can't stay but popped in to hit the like button, so it's great. Great. Let's see. Randy Lee answering Michael Teams is chilling with Cubase today. See, Sable Winters just says she came off a panel discussion surrounding Chris Rock and newly signed presidential executive order regarding bots purchases and ticket price gouging. It's interesting, yeah. It's kind of every concert ticket's immediately 8 times more expensive than the value. So, All right, so Marcus Strymon says, "Hey Greg, I got two crazy questions. Firstly, is it possible to move a drum map note in the editor with only the keyboard in very small steps? So out of raster." Okay. Okay, so let's take a look. Say we're in our drum editor. Okay, so if we want to nudge now one of the cool things is, we could set your nudge here. So say if I want it to be 128th note, I think we hold down, it's Control or Command plus the letter Y, or the left or right arrow. We could do that. Now let's see if we're in the editor, and let's go to nudge. All right, so let's say I just want it, like I'm in bars and beats currently. So we look at this in, all right, so I'll just take this. So we're going to be in bars and beats, and let me just make sure I have nudge turned on here. So we could activate the nudge menu, and we could say, okay, we want it to link to grid. So when I take this particular note, I could link this to the grid, let's say 128th note if I wanted to. So I'm just holding Control and Command. But if you wanted finer control, if we go to the nudge, we could say, okay, I want to nudge not even when my master timeline is set to bars and beats here. So I see measure 3, measure 4, beat 1, 2, 3, 4, beat 1, 2, 3, 4. But we could say now I want to nudge in seconds, and I could set my nudge value here, let's say to 10 milliseconds. So if we zoom way in, I could just take my MIDI notes here, and we could just nudge by 10 milliseconds if we wanted to, or I want to nudge by 1 millisecond. So I could decouple the main grid, and I could nudge by milliseconds. I could nudge by samples. So if I wanted to move a MIDI note over by one sample, we could do that. So we could nudge the events in that aren't by, the highest resolution. So you go to 1/192,000th of a second. Or we could go down to like a single millisecond and be able to nudge. But if you don't see those values, kind of right click, and you'll see the setup toolbar. If you right click at the top and make sure that nudge is turned on, and then we could just choose if you want it to be linked to the grid, where it'll be like musical intervals, 8th note, quarter note, 16th, or if you want it to be in seconds, so we can see different rhythmic intervals. But if you wanted to nudge in a different time factor, we can nudge by seconds, down to a millisecond, or down to an individual sample if you want to. So again, just to nudge within the editors is just going to be Command or Control and the left and right arrow. So if I choose 10 milliseconds, we'll probably see this easier in time. So you can nudge in very small amounts within the MIDI editor and not have it necessarily always linked to the particular master time project. Okay. All right, so see, Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of banana fudge ice cream. Sounds like a great flavor. Look forward to it after the live stream to help my throat. Okay, so Benny just says, question, little problem with this sidechain bass and kick. Can you please show again? Cubase 14 Pro. Okay. Okay, so let me just see if I have this project open. All right, let me just open it up, another one. Okay, so let's talk about side chaining. So let's say we have our side chain here. So currently when we listen to this, we'll have like a kick drum and a bass sound. So we'll go ahead and just play this here. All right, so I want the kick drum to have more impact, and often sometimes we could think of it as being more of a subtractive workflow. Instead of adding more to the kick drum, is maybe taking something away from a different element, such as the bass. So I want to take this synth down, and every time that this kick drum comes in, I want this synth to kind of duck down. So I placed a compressor, and really just about any compressor will work. We could activate the side chain, and now I want to tell it that I want this track to feed the side chain input. So we'll come over to our side chain source. We'll say, okay, and we could have multiple sources if you want. So we'll say, okay, now this kick drum, whenever this kick drum comes in, it's going to trigger the compressor for the synth bass sound. So as we do this now, so the kick sounds louder, but what we're doing is basically as soon as the kick comes in, that turns the compressor on the synth track so that the kick stands out. So again, what we do is on a track that you want to kind of duck down, place the particular place a compressor there. We want to activate the sidechain and then define the sidechain input. So now when we play it, we can see that every time that kick plays. Now if we wanted that same effect and we wanted this sample to trigger that sidechain, but we didn't want to hear this particular sample, what we could do is just take the output bus and change it from stereo out to no bus. And now and that way we could mute the source and just have the effects of the sidechain without the source triggering the sidechain. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, that was from Benny. All right. Okay, so we see Amran Alamudi asks, how are you, Sir Boss? I have a big problem in Cubase. If I have an external arpeggiator, how can I convert to note to custom quantize? I try it, not make MIDI note. I use arpeg third party in Cubase. So it could really depend on what that plugin, like how you're. So not all arpeggiators are going to generate MIDI data. Some will just kind of play it back in real time. But if we wanted to work with a particular arpeggiator, so let's say if I want to use like the built-in arpeggiators that come with Cubase, so I'll come over and let's say if I'm here, let's say I have a synth bass patch. I want to go to my MIDI inserts here. So I'm going to just open up like the Apache. So if we want to record this, we'll come back over here. I'm holding down a chord and it's generating the arpeggio for me. All right. So, but when we look at the actual notes here, we see that it's just one note that's been held. All right. So this track has a MIDI arpeggiator on it. So if I have existing data that I want to reflect the arpeggiator, I would go to the MIDI menu. And if it's in a MIDI insert, a MIDI plugin, we could just come over and say, okay, I want to freeze MIDI modifiers. And now what we see is the result of the arpeggio that's basically been written out. Now, another method that we could use if we want to do this, if we want to record the arpeggio in real time, is just to come over, and we see this when we hover over our arpeggios. At this point, we can move this line down. So anything that is below or that is above this particular line, we can now just come over and say, okay, we're going to just record. So we see that this arpeggio is above the line. So now when I come over here, the arpeggio, I'm just playing a couple, moving my fingers on different notes. So once it is above that line, that arpeggio is automatically written into the part because we have chosen to record the output of this arpeggiation directly into the event. Now, I'm not sure how the third-party plugin, if it is able to generate the arpeggios out. If it does, generally what that would look like is like we would see a plugin. So let's say if we come here to Groove Agent, it would need to have a way of transmitting that MIDI data out of the plugin back into Cubase. Not all arpeggiator plugins do this, but when I go to all MIDI inputs, I could just say, I want Groove Agent to set the MIDI output, so we could take the output of the plugin, the third-party device, and re-record that back into Cubase in real time. So now once you're here, we could do all sorts of quantization with the MIDI data and edit and manipulate however we want. But with third-party plugins, a lot of them just generate the arpeggios, but they're not capable of generating them and sending them back into the host application as well. All right, so we see Marcus Strymon just says great stuff. His next question, and is there an option to change between nudges via custom key command? I've set raster changes as shortcuts. They are 1/128th and 1/8, one for more, one for less dense raster. But the nudge, so let's take a look. We may have, I think we might be able to set it to the next nudge value. So let's see if we could, let's take a look at the key commands. And we'll go to the nudge category. So let's just say nudge. So I think that there's going to be all right, so we could use kind of the, so let's say I just want to come here and, all right, so we could nudge left, nudge right. Let's see if there's maybe under grid. So let's look for, so here we could have a button, a key command that will switch So we can see the next grid type. So we could just have a key command for select the next grid type here or the previous grid type. So let's say if I set this up, let me set my MIDI remote here. So I'm going to come here. So let's say I want this to be next grid type. So I don't think we could set it. All right, so if I come here, let's. All right, so now that I have these key commands, I will set my grid type. So let's say if we are here, let me just activate the grid, my nudge palette. Okay, so we could come right here. Let's see. Okay, so there we could go between our different grids. Let's see if we could. And let's see if we could set the all right, and we just look for maybe under grid. See if there's. Okay, so let's try this. Set next grid type value. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so now we'll go to our nudge palette. So here we could just kind of set. So we can see this go from our half, quarter to 128th. So we could just use keys on our controller to change the values, but not necessarily to a specific value, but you could go previous to next. So give that a try. All right, so we see from Sable Winters. All right, sorry, just let me find. It says, so Sable's question is, last Friday I was seriously looking at a samples and loops bundle for only $99 in second thought. Help me to understand the overall value. I know it's personal choice, but yeah, I see an emoji, but maybe like a cancel out questions. So sometimes, what I think loops and samples are good for is like an initial spark of creativity. So, something, like playing along with, a metronome can be not the most exciting thing to do, not the most inspiring thing to do. But sometimes, when you hear a particular groove in a drum loop, then, that could really kind of, set the whole mood for a particular song. I've seen many people have been just kind of stuck in writing a song, and then they find a loop and use that as kind of the basis, the foundation, maybe the catalyst for the rest of the project. And if they didn't find that one loop to kind of like hang their hat on to start the project may not have gone anywhere. So I think it's good to have a lot of content, like if programming drums isn't your level of expertise, but like I know you're an incredible vocalist, and sometimes incredible vocalists don't program drum beats, and great drummers don't sing well. Sometimes it's not kind of their avenue, their lane that they kind of work with. So I think sometimes having different loops and different options can really just kind of spark creativity. And the more options you have, when you're kind of going through different sounds, that just kind of like, oh, you would never think to combine these two things together, and that could give you like a really interesting musical result. All right, so we see Marcus Strymon says, is there any option to quick link into project windows without the mixer? So I'll go ahead and close let me just add, do a new project here. Yeah, so the quick link function works without the mix console being present or open. So let me just add 16 audio tracks here, or 21. Okay, so I want to, let's say, select all of my tracks. I'm going to close my lower zone. Okay, so what I want to do here is hold down my Alt or Option key plus my Shift key. All these tracks are selected. I'm going to move one fader down. Now let's look at our mix console, and we'll see that if I did it right, all the faders should be down. So the mix console doesn't have to be open. We could do routing, we can add plugins, we could adjust the faders, the panning of multiple tracks on the project window using the quick link functionality. So if I want to pan all these, let's add an insert to all these tracks while holding down Alt or Option plus Shift. I can now just come over, and when we do that, let's get to our mix console. Sorry. So now, as we go to look at the mix console in our lower zone, let me just go to the right window here. But now we'll see that the pan has been set and the insert has been added, and we did all that without the mix console window open. So instead of linking into Mixer, just link the selected channels here. So let's say, okay, I want to shift select, and now I want to just move all of those faders accordingly. So. All right, we see from Benny, just says, thanks, Craig. All right, Mr. Buyer or Mr. Beer just says, is it possible to remap or replace the middle mouse button function with another key or button for panning and navigation? So I know that, like, if we have the project open, let me just switch to this project. I know, so I don't think it's assignable in Cubase, but it may be. I know that we could kind of navigate if we hold down kind of the scroll button. So we could, if we just hold down the scroll button on a conventional mouse, that we could navigate here. So I don't think that is reassignable. It could be if you have like a Logitech mouse that allows those particular functions to, allows functions to be assigned to this wheel versus this wheel. This button is the Alt key or Option key. Hold down this button. This is the Command or Control. This is Shift. That some mice that you could program the buttons to do particular functions. But I think the default behavior, I don't know a way of changing that. But if you have kind of a user, a programmable mouse, that you might be able to. And when you program the mouse, it's basically just do this for when I push this, it's this key that's being pressed. So you're kind of mimicking keys on a computer keyboard. I don't have a programmable mouse. I should probably get one. But I think that's how it's going to work. All right, so we see from Omran Alamorudi, says can't MIDI capture. So, obviously Cubase can capture incoming MIDI data, but a lot of programs and a lot of arpeggiators don't transmit that activity, don't transmit the arpeggio. So if the arpeggio isn't being transmitted from the device, but it's kind of playing in real time, then that's a design limitation of that third-party arpeggiator. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher on from Oxford. See Val just explaining splice to Sable. Okay, so Marcus Strymon asks, is there any way to transform a drum map into a Cubase MIDI map? Example from AD. So I'm not sure, maybe Marcus, if you could indicate, I know it's about 15 minutes ago when he asked this, but let me know what a Cubase MIDI map is. I know what the drum map is, but I'm just not exactly sure what the MIDI map is. And it says example from AD, so I'm not understanding what AD is. I'm sorry for being dense and not understanding. Okay, Marcus Strymon asks, is it also possible that Cubase automatically inputs a note played on the MIDI keys on the current cursor position without step input? Thanks, Greg. So many practicality questions today. So, I think that if you're playing here, so let's say, okay, I'm playing here, and let's say I have, pad shop here. So, if you want to enter the note, I think it's, either you should, I wouldn't expect that if I have an event that I would, I guess, I wouldn't expect for the most part that, if I hit a note that it's going to be entered into the event. Now, what I can do is, let's say, okay, I played the most magical thing ever. There is the retrospective record. So if we come over here, right, just to the right of the transport, I could click there, and now whatever note I played can be inputted. So if we wanted to go to our retrospective record here, we could clear the buffer if we want to. So if we at this point want to say, okay, I want to just play a note, and then I hit retrospective record, then that note could automatically be entered directly there without being in step input or without placing it in record. So, and the design intention of that is like, oh, I just played the most amazing thing, and I, like a dummy, I didn't hit record and I lost my masterpiece. Then you could just enable retrospective record, and that MIDI event will show up for you. So maybe experiment with the retrospective record. All right. All right, so we see question from Sable. Just says, Greg, I'm beginning to experiment with signature tracks. I'm attempting to jazz up a simple project. What's the best method to add movement to a slower jazz vocal standard? What does it look like? All right, so one of the things that I would do, signature tracks I think are going to be pretty constant. Like I don't think that, I guess if you took like a slow jazz thing and maybe like a slow jazz ballad and you had like a double time section, you might do that. But I would do subtle tempo changes. So let's come over and let's say we're doing kind of like a ballad thing. I would work with dynamics and work, arrangement stuff and work with and just subtle tempo changes. So let's say I was coming over here, so let's add, we'll do like the Simon Phillips jazz drums. Okay. All right, so let's say so like if I was doing like with Groove Agent, a couple things that you could do is, let's say all right, let me just bear with me just a moment. So let me just add that kit again. All right, so let's say I was just kind of playing along here. All right, so let's say I'm all right, so some of the things that I would do is, let's say as I want this to follow the transport, and I'm going to add just a subtle tempo. So I'm going to add a tempo track. So let's say we're going to start at, we'll start at 120, and let's say, okay, we want that to play for like 5 bars. And I'm going to take just like this pattern in Groove Agent. And I'm going to say like every 4 bars, just do kind of a fill. And we'll say let's say every 8 bars. So it's not, and this will kind of play one of the random fills. And I'm going to increase my tempo, let's say from 120 here to 124. So let's say as we're playing along, and also I want to take my automation and I just want to go from, let's say, 0 dB. Let's say we're at 0 to start with. Okay. So let me just select this, and I want to, at the same time it speeds up, I want it to go up, let's say 1 dB. And then we'll let it go for a couple of measures. So let's say we'll do for measure 5 to 13. I want this to go down to 120. There's a lot of just like subtle tempo changes can make like a big difference, I think. So let's say now we want this to be, so we're going from, we'll select our automation node here, and we'll just say we want this to be 0. And this automation node will have it be 1. So just listening just to the drums. And let me make sure I have my tempo track. So it's a little faster. So like little subtle lifts, you know, like think of it as like a musical lift. And I think arrangements, you know, it's like, okay, everyone kind of lays back during the verse, you know, and when a chorus comes in, maybe you change the chord voicings, you speed up the tempo a little bit. So like when I used to do a lot of MIDI productions, I would always speed the chorus up a beat or two a minute. Slow down the verse, let it settle, you know, maybe do a slight tempo change over a bridge, you know, and stuff like that. And I think musical arrangements can make a big difference as well. So, but I would probably not think to approach it doing time signatures where you're going from 4/4 to 3/4. I think that could be a bit disorienting for the listener. But I would try just subtle tempo changes, and if we're kind of, I'll just make this a little more extreme here. So let's say we would go to our tempo for demonstration purposes here. We'll say, okay, I want this to go to 132. And let's have this go up like maybe 4 dB. So just get an idea here. So say the verse, and let's say the chorus. That could create kind of a little bit of tension, and if you wanted to, and let's say you're coming out of the chorus, you want to settle back to the verse. So like that little musical rhythmic tension, I think can make something that could be kind of very sterile and generic and make it more musical and pleasing to listen to. Right. All right, so we see Roland Stuff says, hi Greg, do you know why the level of individual MIDI notes selected in Very Audio in the lower window is a lot quieter from the level of the same note when played in the full mix? Puzzling, thanks. Okay, so do you know why the level of individual MIDI notes selected in Very Audio in the editor window is a lot quieter than the level of the same note when played? All right, so it could be with how maybe the control room is set up. So let's take a look. Okay, so let's say we have
I feel the.
All right, so let's say we're coming along here.
I feel the weight.
All right, so let me just go to very audio here. All right, so when we select a note here and we have like the acoustic feedback enabled, so that could be, that's kind of going through our control room. So let's say if our control room is, and we listen to it here, so we say, so, but let's say if we come up, let's say if we set our listen dim level, so I'm going to set this to 0. Let's see if that makes a difference when we listen to the volume here. Oh, sorry. So now we get a play. Grab the ring tool. So it could be just the listen level. So try adjusting the listen level here, and that will set kind of your preview volume is going to be based upon that. So we come over here, we listen to the listen level, and now when we listen to it in the project, so now my listen level is dimmed and it's much softer there. So, and if you don't see this particular area, click on like the main tab, and you may just have to and then you'll see this levels area right here, and then adjust the listen volume upward, and I think that'll take care of it for you. All right, Val says, in a recent project, I got the pop-up text that the current time stretch is not possible. Why does that happen? Some of the algorithms that are used for time stretching, if it's like an extreme time stretch, they're only set to, they're set for optimum levels, and often those levels could be between, you know, like a certain percentage. So if it's outside of that percentage, like when sometimes using the elastic algorithms from Z-Plane, that it's going to give you that kind of flag message that, you know, it knows that these algorithms are designed within a specific threshold, a percentage of varying, you know, slower or faster to be effective. So that's why you get the message. All right, we see Pablo's having coffee time now after dinner. Sounds great. All right, so you see FlyV says, boy, I was ever going through issues getting my new device set up, all buttons functioning, but got it working now. So it's great. All right, so we see Ali Danesh says, when you select any arpeggiator on a MIDI insert and put it on Hertz, not quarter, eighth, and you automate it, it gets buggy and doesn't work. Could it be fixed, or is it me doing something wrong? Let's take a look at it and see. All right, so let's go to our synth bass. All right, so let's open up our Apache here. Let me see if it's in. All right, let me see if it's in Apache SX. Okay, so let's come over here. All right, so let me just record that and we'll see how it sounds. All right, so just solo this here. All right. Oh, let me try it again. Maybe I didn't hit record. Sorry. All right, and let's listen to it here. Let me. So we had super short values. So it seems to capture kind of what I did. Let me know if I'm doing it differently than you are, Ali. All right, you see, it says, I also think arpeggiators should be on Cubase as a plugin. So it is a MIDI plugin, and it's also, you have arpeggiators within different instruments as well. So it's kind of working as a plugin, I would say. Okay, so we see Marcus Streitman says, so addictive drums or Slate or others have their custom maps, and you can also export, but always have to rename their maps in the editor manually. So one of the things that you could do, if you're doing like going from this instrument to this instrument is like, so let's say when we go to add an instrument track here, let's add, let's say a groove agent, we will come to the drum map. Let's go to your drum map setup. So we'll click on the plus sign here. So, you could have in notes and out notes. So once we actually set up the drum map, of going from this, like an addictive drums to groove agent particular kit, you could, have different in notes being remapped to different out notes on different MIDI channels from different MIDI ports. And that could be saved as a drum map so that when you actually load up a drum map, it could automatically translate and remap drums from one instrument to another instrument. So, but that would have to be manually set up. But you could always encourage addictive drums to make a drum map they probably have all the data of all their samples that they've used. All right. All right, so we see Ali Danesh. It says there's no arpeggiator on inserts, is it? So, obviously an arpeggiator is going to be a MIDI-based effect. So you just go to your MIDI inserts, and here you could see two different arpeggiators right there. So it's not going to be an audio effect because the audio, an arpeggiator is going to be used on MIDI. See, Marcus Strymon just says, I'm just satisfied with Cubase, just great. Okay. All right. Pablo loves the Nashville library. So it's a wonderful library done by my friend Alan Morgan. All right, Marcus Strymon says, only thing I would miss sometimes is a separate mastering page where you can see the stereo out, stereo file on a dedicated page, and maybe doing the mastering instead of adding a new project. So, we could also, if you want to, let's say if you have like a mix down project. So let's see if I have this one up. Just open a quick project here. All right, so in this we have like a multi-track project, and then we have a mix down file within the project here. So, if you have the mix down project, what you can do is, let's say, okay, I want to just solo that. And if you wanted to hide all the other tracks, if we come over to, you'll see a track visibility and configurations. And there's like a preset here. You can say show only selected tracks. So you could then only see like your mix down track that you're mastering. So if you wanted to. All right, just reading through questions. All right. All right, so Ali Dinesh says also, Mr. Undo, I feel we should be able to set drum map to the new drum machine track as we have on Groove Agent as an instrument track. All right, so if we have, let's say, our drum machine, let me just jump back projects here. Okay, so let's say if we are in, okay, so we have our drum machine track. So let's say if we are here, so, if we say, okay, let's just go ahead and add, here, let me just activate the project first, that would help. All right, so I think, part of the design intention was, okay, we have our drum machine here. We have all of the sounds listed, so we can come over like this. And then when we go to the pattern editor, all of those sounds will just automatically be carried over, so you don't have to load up a separate drum map. They are just automatically carried over, so it's not a drum map. Probably most people using the drum machine would tend to use I think the design intention was for it to be, used in conjunction with, like the pattern editor. You could obviously use it with a MIDI part as well, but when you use it with the pattern editor, then all of the drum sounds immediately carry over. Okay, so Witty Music says, hey Greg, in a new drum machine, is there a way to pitch shift all the samples on the drum pad simultaneously? It seems I have to do all the layers separately, which is a hassle. Thanks. So it might be where we have different ones. So let's come over here and say I want to, I'll just pop over, let's drop some samples in. So I think it might have to be done one at a time. So let's say if we come, yeah, so I think it's going to be one at a time with that. Hang on a second, my son just popped in. Sorry, my son just popped in. All right. Okay. Okay, so we see Petro Kashapa says, why my pitch bend goes out of key. So pitch bend isn't restricted to a key. It is a range of semitones. So, but when entering in pitch bend data, what you could do again is, as we showed earlier, so it's not like you could take pitch bend events. It's going to be just a number of semitones. It's not going to be, pitch bend isn't going to be set to, to filter out pitches that are out of key. But if you want it to come over, let's set your pitch bend here, and again, set your range. If you find that it's not returning to a particular point, all you have to do is come right over here and do snap, because if snap is turned off, you could say, I put it here, and it could be slightly flat, and it could be hard to know. But if the snap is on, here it's going to snap to particular pitch, like so. But again, it's going to do that chromatically, and that you may end up out of key or out of, but that's just the nature of pitch bend data. Okay, so we see from John, who asks, Groove Agent 5 full version misses a beat when you change tempo, signature from 4/4 to 2/4 while playing a pattern. Okay, so I'm not sure if the pattern you're doing is in 4/4 or 2/4, so let's just take a quick look. Okay, he said full groove agent. All right, so let's say we have, just find something a little more. All right, so let's say we're playing along, we have this, we'll sync it to transport. All right, let me add a signature track. All right, so let's see what happens. We had this follow the transport. So we'll be in 4/4 for 4 measures. So I guess it could depend upon the pattern, but it seemed like when we go to, let's just look at the pattern editor, but we could see that, you know, so we come over here, let's see if there's any tempo scale. I mean, that sounded kind of normal to me, but it could really depend on the pattern if the pattern isn't going to work in 2/4. But let's see what happens if we move this to 4/4. I'll just start here. But it sounds like the kick was there for me, but let me know if it's a particular pattern that you would that you're finding it not working on. But you know, that seemed to kind of restart the pattern when there's 2 measures of 2/4 or 1 measure of 2/4. All right, so we see from Ali Dinesh, says, I think we should be able to use the range selection tool for the drum editor individually or for each line, like kick and snare. I'll pass that along again. I know that currently, like when we go into like a drum editor, that the drum editor itself, when we use and it took a long time to get the range tool in the MIDI editor, key editor, so I kind of lobbied hard for that. But when we do use the range, that the range is going to be, you know, strictly for, you know, it's going to be kind of global so that we could include different things. But I understand the desire to just select a particular range. But for a lot of tasks, you might also just be able to say, okay, I want to take, you know, these particular notes, and let's see if we. So I think it's going to be one or the other. So, but I understand the desire to kind of do that and be able to paste it. I will pass it along. So if we duplicate that, it's not going to be on the grid because we're not duplicating the range. But I'll pass that along as a feature request. Okay, so we see from Sable Winters, just says, okay, the tempo track in this case is a better approach, not signature track, which might be more for orchestral, for example. It makes perfect sense. All right, wonderful to see George checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Roland Stuff says, thanks for suggesting control room level setting can be adjusted, change vary audio note level monitoring when editing. All understood, but unfortunately my control room listen fader is grayed out. So one, make sure that if you have the control room is active. So let's see if so let me know if you're running all right, so if it's grayed out, just hit this little L button right here in the control room, and then that way you'll have kind of the listen level appear. So try just hitting that button directly there. And then so if it's grayed out, you can't adjust it, turn that on, now it's adjustable. So let me know if that works for you, Roland Stuff. All right, so we see from Ali Danesh, says, my bad for the explanation on the arpeggiator, although that was a new approach from you using it, but the way I want to do it is to draw a chord for 8 bars and automate the hertz in the arpeggiator. All right, so let's take a look, see if we can do that. We may be able to do it with kind of using MIDI remote or quick controls, so... All right, so let's come over here and say I want to, I think we have a chord track already on here. All right, so we have a chord track. And I will just duplicate this chord track a couple times here. Okay, so I'm going to go to like let's say cello voice here, and I just want to do, I'll just create the chords. Okay, so let's come here. I will get to the chord track and we'll say chords to MIDI. All right, so let's say we just have kind of and then we change the voice here. Let's say 2. All right, so we have kind of block chords. All right, so I want to, let's go to my MIDI remote here. Okay, so I want to, let's say we'll take this particular knob. I'm going to assign this to focus quick control 1. Okay, so I'm going to apply that mapping. Let's come back and let's put the arpeggiator on this. Okay, so I'm going to, let's say our Apache on this, and for my quick controls, let's click on learn, and then I'm going to just adjust this parameter. Right, so now when I play this, I have block chords. Okay, so we'll look at our events here. So we should all right, let's check. All right, let me just... Here, I'll just try a different part here, sorry. All right, so we play this. All right, let me just check. All right, I'm just going to do it on different parts. Sorry about that. All right, now it's playing. Okay, so I have, let's say, a MIDI insert here on this. I'll just... Sorry, let me just... Okay, so let's say we have this Rhodes part here. All right, so let me just try it with this Rhodes. Okay, so... Let me just do this on a new project here real quick before we run out of time. Sorry. But... Okay. So we come here. Okay, so I'm just going to draw in. All right, I'll just hold this chord down. Okay, so I want to now come over. So we listen to this. Let's grab our arpeggio. So let's say our Apache SX. So now when we play back. All right, so I want to, let's go to the quick controls. And I'm going to click on, so I enable the quick controls. We come over here, we click on the L. I'm going to, let's switch this. I'm going to turn the L off. I'm going to switch this from quarter. Let's say now I grab this. So that's learning that particular quick control. So I'm going to just come over here. We learn that parameter. And now if we want to automate this, let's just put, I think I could just record. So I'm going to so I move the parameter on my controller. All right, and then so I think if we look that we could see it as kind of a quick control parameter so that we could just automate these particular parameters. So let's say if we want to come over here to more, we'll say MIDI channel, and I think that we could go to the inserts, our Apache SX. Let's set our play. So we can have, let's say, step size. Okay. And now if we wanted to just kind of draw in our step size. So you could automate kind of the step size just like so. So if you grab kind of, so at this point, so you can see the parameters being automated right there. So it's kind of a workaround, but if you want to do it that approach, you can. But, I think using the built-in functions work great for that. All right, so we see Jesse Jose says, is there a template save issue? Sometimes when I create a new template, then I go back to update it during the session, it doesn't appear anymore. Does the template auto update now? So it doesn't auto update, but your template is always going to be visible. So if you come here to the hub and open a hub, and then you'll see under more, you can see all of your templates will show up there. So make sure that you actually have it saved as a template first and not just a project that you're working from. All right, see if there's one more quick question. All right, so we see from Esteban Carlos Benson, the track visibility doesn't work when it's placed above the track divider line. So I think the design intention is if you placed it above the divider line that you always want it to be visible. So that's kind of the design intention with that. All right. So with that, we are just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. We'll be doing this again on Friday. I will be have vacation time and some travel time. So I will be out on vacation from the 11th through the 21st, and then the 21st through the 25th, I'll be in California for meetings. Let me know if you want to do for next week live streams on Tuesday and Thursday, so we can get 2 live streams in on 1 week, or if you just want to do 1 live stream next week. So I will be missing some live streams for vacation and for some work travel, just a heads up with that. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to be safe and healthy. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.